I'm Mark Belk. I'm Laura Belk's husband, and we have been involved in Nurturing Nations for several years now. I have had lots of experiences, seen lots of interesting things as we've gone and traveled to Ghana to help children there and help alleviate some of the difficulties that we observed when we first went there. I'm here today to tell you especially about child trafficking. This is one of the really difficult problems that we encounter when we go there, and it is real. It's very real, but it's a complex problem. It's not the sort of thing that you can solve by simply going and finding the traffickers and locking them up one by one, because the roots of child trafficking are in two really difficult things. One is the lack of education, and two is poverty. Those two things create conditions where child trafficking will continue to occur no matter what we try to do with the traffickers themselves, with the end individuals that are profiting from this, because those roots run deep and they create terrible choices, terrible dilemmas for the mothers and fathers in West Africa and many other places in the world. In Ghana, we have found out that the lack of education means immediately your options are limited. Not just your options for making a living, but your options for finding food, for being able to have food so that you don't starve to death. Those options are limited if you don't have an education. And if you're born into poverty and you're in this extreme impoverished condition, then you are immediately faced with these very difficult situations, very difficult decisions. And these lead to despair. And this is not the kind of despair that you and I feel when our favorite sports team loses a game or something like that. This is despair that hits at the very root of your life and your being and who you are. Let me illustrate how these problems of poverty and lack of education contribute to child trafficking. So I want you to do a bit of a thought experiment here. Imagine that you are an 18-year-old young woman living in West Africa, and you are pregnant right now with your third child, not because you chose to have 3 children, two and one on the way, but because you were either physically forced or you were in a position where you had no other choice than to sell yourself, to provide sexual favors for someone so that you could have something to eat. This choice is faced by many, many young girls in extreme poverty, and the only thing they have left is their body, themselves. That's the only thing they can sell. So here you are, 18 years old, you're about to deliver your third child, you have no medical care, you may or may not know where your mom is, you may or may not know where your grandma is, and you can sometimes ask them for food. You work each day, you go and do menial service for someone because you don't have an education, so you can't get a job that pays more than just a small amount in a given day. That amount sometimes is enough to feed you and your children the food that they need to, one meal a day, the food that they need to make it to the next day and not starve to death. So this is your choice. This is your life right now. So imagine that you're in this situation and your choice is you can watch your children slowly starve to death, the children that you have, or you can listen to what a person comes along and makes an offer to you, and you can listen to them. So imagine this offer. Here comes a person who says, "Oh, I see you're having a hard time. You're having a hard time getting enough food." And they might bring you some food right there, right? And in those desperate circumstances, you say, "Oh, that's great. I'm going to listen to them." And they say, You have a child here who's 8, 10, 12 years old, and we will provide opportunity for them to learn a trade, we'll take them and provide some things for them. And not only that, we will send you back some money each month so that you have some money for food for you and the rest of your family. Well, this is a terrible dilemma, right? Because you may not know what their plans are for your child. You may have heard from other people that once the child goes with those people, you never hear from them again. And you may receive some money from them, or you may not. But the choice is, do I watch my children starve to death now because I don't have any options? I try the best I can, but I don't have many options. I don't have control over whether I have more children or not. Or do I have one of them go into this trade, whatever it is, and then maybe I can support the rest of them and maybe things will get better. And so we don't face dilemmas like that, but I promise you many, many women and young boys in Ghana and other parts of West Africa face those problems because of the long cycle of poverty and the lack of education, the lack of opportunity. They have never had those opportunities. So what do we do? How do we solve this problem? Well, as I said before, we don't solve it by running and getting the traffickers and saying, stop doing that, right? If one gets locked up, if one gets fined, 3 more will come out because this is an opportunity for them to make money, right? This is an opportunity for them to make money, and you know that you can't control it that way. So what do we do? Well, first and foremost, number one, we stabilize families. We economically stabilize families for a relatively small amount, right? A relatively small amount from our standards. We can go into that family and say, look, we will help you. We'll provide money so that you have food each day. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have to work. You still have to work the same as you did. But when it gets to be those really hard pinch times, you're going to have food for your family. We're not going to pay for everything. This is not just, we don't expect them to just sit around and do nothing. They work really hard. And this stabilizes that family structure. This allows mothers and grandmothers and sometimes fathers to stay in that and provide for the children that they have there in their family. That's a really important way, and that takes away much of the incentive, much of the dilemma, much of that terrible, terrible choice that otherwise mothers would have to make. So imagine when we come to that 18-year-old mother that you're thinking that you were trying to put yourselves in their shoes, we come to that mother and we say, we will provide a small amount of money so that you have food. Your job is to care for your children, to work hard and care for your children, and we'll make sure that they have food each day. That alleviates much of the stress. Secondly, and maybe even a more important long-term solution, is we provide education to those children. Now, sometimes the mothers are beyond the point. We can't educate them. They can't go back to elementary school, but we can intervene there and we can provide a free education. We provide this. We support some other schools. We have built a school in Ghana, and that school provides opportunity for over 100 children to be able to break that cycle of poverty so that when they get their education, now they have options. Now they have a way to continually provide for themselves. They're not going to get rich. They're not going to all of a sudden be able to achieve the highest economic status, but they will be able to break out of that cycle of poverty, of children and parents continually looking every day for something to eat. Education is key. So that costs us a little bit of money, right? That costs us some of our money that otherwise we would do some other entertainment or something else with. but we can make a lifetime difference, a multiple generation difference for those children. And this is the way that we get rid of, that we, number one, prevent, and two, finally make it where it is not the choice of parents to give up their children to these traffickers. And we can get rid of that. We can solve that problem. Yes, it requires a little bit of sacrifice on our part, but the reward is multiple generations of children who will grow up in a stable and stable condition, and they will be able to keep their children from falling into that difficult poverty kind of situation. That's what we try to do at Nurturing Nations. Now, we're going to illustrate this with a couple of stories, or a story about Daniel was one of the first children that we rescued from child trafficking. He had already been sold. We went and got him back, and I'll let him tell that story. And there have been many others that are in our sponsorship program that we have been able to rescue. It makes a lifetime of difference. It changes things with a little bit of sacrifice on our part, makes a big difference on their part.
My name is Pinto Daniel. I was sold to a farm place for fish harvesting, but because of Nurturing Nation, I was rescued and I was sent back to Kofikwe, and I went to school, and because of Nurturing Nation, I completed. So I thank them for how far they've brought me from rescuing me from child labor. And if not them, I should have died by now. But speak of them, I'm still alive and I've now completed school. I thank them for how far they've brought me, and I would like to be a musician in future so that I will sing and every Ghanaian will see me, and through them people will see how far they've brought me. I thank them very much.